Well, hello there. Very good morning to you. It is 6 a.m. just in time for AM Live. And we have lots lined up for you in the next coming hour. How's your morning? It's been quite chilly here in Nairobi. Quite a bit of rain. I don't know how it's been on the other parts of the country. Talk to us, tell us how it's been. And of course, today we'll be having a conversation around the state of safety and health of learners across learning institutions. This comes in the backdrop of the reported deaths of 3 students at the Mukumu Girls Secondary School, and of course some other students have been hospitalized. We'll be taking a look at really what's the state of health and safety of learners in schools. That's what we'll be having a conversation on with my panelists a little bit later. But we also have stories we've lined up for you. We'll be taking a look at the papers as well. What do we have? That's what we'll be analyzing here in the morning. But we're going to begin with those stories that we prepared for you. And there is a 90% chance that Azimio will go back to mass protests. That is according to ODM Secretary General and Nairobi Senator Edwin Sifuna, who cites lack of seriousness and commitment from Kenya Kwanza as a reason as to why they will take the conversation back to the people. Azimio is set to meet non-governmental organizations today before a meeting with the people on Sunday, with several other rallies across the country in plan. Ibrahim Karanja reports.
Absolute lack of good faith, the contempt with which they are taking this process, the contempt for the opposition, and the contempt for the public, which is genuinely invested in a genuine dialogue to save the country.
Of 1 to 10.
Yes.
How likely are we that you're heading back to the streets?
I would say 9 out of 10. Where we are as we speak to you now, 9 out of 10.
That they are contributing to their own injury by making these inflammatory remarks that is annoying, that does not go well with the spirits of Kenyans. That's causing.
If we feel that what we have put on the table, it will depend, it's a give and take. But what we feel that we are also being pressed at the corner, we have to go back to the people.
It's a Somali saying that says, if a man wants your wife, even if you give him your beautiful daughter, he will not accept it. So in my thinking or my opinion is that they are not serious on their part.
On Sunday in Kamkunji, I want to ask the people of Nairobi to tell me if I am adding any value to that team, if in fact we are not going to discuss the question of Unga. And if they tell me that you have nothing else to discuss there, I will very respectfully ask my coalition leaders to release me from the team.
They are not genuine in this. They should give the government a chance and time to put their policies into action.
Well, the activities of the Azimio Kenya Kwanza bipartisan committee have stalled following deep divisions among its members over the issues to be canvassed in the committee. A section of the Azimio members led by Nairobi Senator Edwin Sifuna have vowed to withdraw from the committee if the issue of lowering the current high cost of living will not be part of the agenda. On its part, Kenya Kwanza has rejected the inclusion of any agenda beyond the reconstitution of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. And TV's political affairs reporter Vincent Odwor has more.
The future of the Azimio Kenya Kwanza bipartisan committee is now in limbo. Azimio membership in the committee wants all their raised grievances, including the demand to lower the current high cost of living, handled by the committee. But Kenya Kwanza members insist the committee should tackle only the issue of recruitment of the new commissioners to the IEBC, as announced by President William Ruto. ODM Secretary General Edwin Sifuna, who is also a member of the committee, says issues affecting Kenyans must be on the table.
On Sunday in Kamkunji, I want to ask the people of Nairobi to tell me if I am adding any value to that team, if in fact we are not going to discuss the question of Unga. And if they tell me that you have nothing else to discuss there, I will very respectfully ask my coalition leaders to release me from the team.
The Azimio members argue the bipartisan committee doesn't have to exercise its mandate through Parliament, even as Kenya Kwanza members maintain Parliament is the only way.
Until this is legitimized by going to the House, having the standing orders invoked, a motion brought in, names proposed, approved by the House, there is actually no committee as we speak.
It doesn't need any formality. You know, that's what I'm saying. We in Azimio see these people as our brothers. We are not enemies. Me and Khalwale speak.
The move by Kenya Kwanza to include Jubilee legislator Adan Keynan on its side, despite Jubilee being an affiliate party in Azimio coalition, has angered the Azimio brigade and seems to have stalled all the activities of the committee. This comes few months after a section of Jubilee legislators decamped from Azimio and joined Kenya Kwanza.
They have, in their own wisdom, knowing very well that the question of fidelity to political parties and the respect for multi-party democracy is a matter on the table. They then go and include members of the Azimio coalition on their side of negotiators. This tells you that, or demonstrates to you, the absolute lack of good faith, the contempt with which they are taking this process.
Because if the same argument is applied to us, we will also apply to them the question of Kosing, who is an MP on KUP. KUP recently joined Kenya Kwanza. So how does Kosing, who is actually part of Kenya Kwanza, join the Azimio team?
I think they are preempting. And it is wrong now with the formation of the committee again if they start commenting on the issues before even they sit together.
The Azimio 7-member team of negotiators is expected to address the media on Thursday.
As the Kenya Kwanza and Azimio political rift finds itself into the bipartisan committee, the issues to be discussed by the committee remain undetermined, even as both sides stick to their guns. Vincent Odur, NTV, Nairobi.
All right, thanks, Vincent. Now, Interior Cabinet Secretary Professor Kithure Kindiki has become the first Cabinet Secretary to field questions from members of Parliament on the floor of the House under the 2010 Constitution dispensation. Top on the agenda of questions by private notice was the bandit menace. Professor Kindiki now admits that recent rescue mission by bandits in Iten Hospital could have been countered but fear of collateral damage on patients at the hospital gave way for the hospitalized bandit to escape. NTV Sydney Chazima has more.
At last, one of the proposals outlined in President William Ruto's memo to Parliament last year has been actualized. After amending the standing orders to allow cabinet secretaries to appear on the floor of the House to answer questions, Interior Cabinet Secretary Professor Kithure Kindiki was the first to take the hot seat in Parliament. Members of Parliament, conformed into a committee of the whole House, posed questions on why the security apparatus in Iten failed to act on the recent bandit operation that saw a suspected bandit rescued from hospital, in essence avoiding capture.
The bandit that was taken away in hospital in Iten is the one that killed my cousin. Tell us when that wounded bandit who was in hospital will be brought to book.
That a shootout inside that facility would have caused fatalities on patients, and that gave a leeway for the rescue to succeed. We are on him. We have some leads. We believe we shall arrest him.
The recent demonstrations in Chuka, occasioned by the shooting of County Boda Boda Association Chairman Willis Mugambi, also informed the round of questioning. Justice and Legal Affairs Committee Chair George Murugara calling on the Cabinet Secretary to compensate the family of the deceased.
What measures will the government put in place to ensure that the family of the late Willis Mugambi Kiraku, the Boda Boda Chairman Tharaka-Nithi, who was fatally shot on the 8th of April 2023, is properly, sufficiently, and adequately compensated for the loss of their kin without undue delay?
If the person has died in the hands of our officers, the procedures for compensation will ensue.
The deficiencies in the Department of Civil Registration were also pointed out.
What support can you give to the single mothers to ensure that they get birth certificates for their children, because they need this to be able to process medical insurance for their children?
The challenge is arising from the capacity at the government press. The government press has not been modernized for a very long time.
PS Citizen Services have engaged with him on a unique identifier system that seeks to capture data of newborns digitally, electronically. But now the CS is telling us about modernizing the government printer, hiring another person at the government printer who will be more efficient, leasing equipment instead of buying new equipment. CS, you must tell us, where do you sit? Are you aligned to the president's agenda to digitize, or are you not?
Kindiki's appearance before Parliament now eases the path towards accountability, as the recent process of reaching cabinet secretaries for questioning involved what legislators termed as too much bureaucracy. Sydney Chazima, NTV.
All right, thanks Sydney for that. Now, Mombasa has been ranked as the 4th most preferred holiday destination in the world, giving value for money. This is according to the United Kingdom's Post Office Holiday Travel Money Report, showing how Britons are travelling and choosing Kenya's coastal belt to beat their holiday spending and avoiding busting their budget. NTV's Kevin Mutai now tells us that this is a glory to Kenya's tourism sector, but players in the industry decry government policies that are locking away hundreds of thousands of foreign tourists.
The news has been positively received by the players in the tourism sector, with high expectations of more foreign travelers visiting Kenya's coastal region. This now places the port city of Mombasa as one of the favorite holiday destinations in the global tourism arena, with a favorable budget of spending for holiday makers.
Our currency has devalued over the last 6 months in a big way, which is not good for the economy, but it is what it is, and we need to take advantage of it because it makes Kenya a cheaper destination in the source market. Zamani ilikuwa ukipata dola unapata karibu shilingi 120, leo inafika karibu 140. Pound ilikuwa 130, leo ni karibu 170. Inamaanisha kwamba ikiwa utatoka Uingereza unakuja hapa utapata shilingi ya zaidi.
In the survey, 40 destinations were sampled worldwide, ranking Cape Town in South Africa as the first to offer best value for money, followed by Marmaris in Turkey, and thirdly, Sunny Beach in Bulgaria. Kenya's Mombasa is at number 4 in the Coast Barometer findings.
Tumeweza kujipima na South Africa kama Cape Town, kuona kwa nini wamekuwa number 1, na tukaangalia kwa vitu ambazo wameweza kufanya. Wao tayari wamekuwa accredited katika Blue Flag accreditations. Tumeona pia wana open sky policy.
It's paramount that the industry players up their games in terms of service, in terms of their facilities, so that we can go from one place of glory to the next and not drop the ball.
Despite the fame, the industry is still reeling from policies that still deny the country the much needed flow of foreign currency. Stiff restrictions in visa applications and lack of licenses for charter flights are also pushing away tourists to other destinations. The challenges remains a hindrance, even as projections on safari and beach holidays looking promising in the coming tourism circuit.
For the last 3 months, we're having an entire mix of the Polish market, the British market, and our majority of the business segment is the Germans. Then, of course, the local market, which takes up to 50% of the market share.
It pains me. However, I'm happy for them when I see Zanzibar doing very well. And you see every evening, you go on Flightradar and you see it. You see 4 or 5 aircrafts following each other, wide-bodied aircrafts. We are talking of 777s, we are talking of Airbus 320s, all heading from Amsterdam. Others are, coming from Italy. Others are coming from different source markets. Unbelievable, including Turkey, and they're all heading to Zanzibar. And they're overflying Kenya. And you ask yourself, why are we doing this to ourselves?
The best hotspot for value lies in accommodation, pricing, in meals and drinks, among other essential products for the tourists. Kevin Mutai, NTV in Mombasa.
And members of parliament in the National Assembly have supported a motion aimed at lowering the cost of electricity. The members of parliament say that the many tariffs imposed on the commodity are a challenge to many Kenyans and have to be urgently addressed. Martin Mwangi with the details.
of the National Assembly is just about to commence.
In the motion tabled by Laikipia Woman Representative Jane Kagiri earlier this year, the legislator seeks to have the Departmental Committee on Energy undertake an inquiry to the operations of Kenya Power in relation to the agreements it has with independent power producers. The findings of the inquiry are to be submitted to the floor of the House within 4 months.
I want to request the Ministry of Energy to look into the quality performance of some of these IPPs. I am privileged to at least host 3 of these contractors, and it is very embarrassing when we were with the CS Churchill to note that some of them were given these contracts in 2013 and they have not been able to achieve that.
The motion also seeks to bar the Ministry of Energy and Kenya Power from getting into any new contracts with any IPPs until the House makes a resolution on the matter. The ministry is also required to engage with power producers in order to reduce the cost of power.
If you look at the cost of the unit that you pay, it is almost a quarter. But 3/4 of that bill is actually taxes and fuel and a lot of things that actually do not concern the production of the consumption of the power.
According to the audited accounts for the financial year ended June 2021, KenGen supplied 70% of the electricity and was paid a total of 44.8 billion shillings. On the other hand, the IPPs, which only supplied about 30% of the total power, were paid more than 56 billion shillings. The MPs have also urged the government to consider alternative sources of energy that are cheaper.
It is real important that we consider as a country to do a radical shift from relying on hydro only and lay emphasis on solar energy.
The legislators have also urged Kenya Power to ensure that proper connections of power are done to ensure there is no loss of revenue. Martin Mwangi, NTV.
And questions abound over the maize deal between Kenya and Zambia. Agricultural experts argue that the deal, though shrouded in mystery, is unrealistic. On the other hand, farmers view it as betrayal from the government, arguing that the move is meant to paralyze their farming. Brian Obuya reports.
It began with a visit to Zambia, where Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Mithika Linturi and his Zambian counterpart announced the decision, letting Kenya lease some 50,000 hectares or so for maize farming.
The government of Kenya can select private sector players who can come and cultivate and produce required food commodities, not only for sale in Zambia, but also very specific for export into Kenya. That is the type of renaissance that we should be talking about.
The move has left agricultural experts scratching their heads for sense. With little details availed, the conundrum is confusing many.
Then what would benefit would the farmers who go there get? Because if you're able to produce it at 1,700 locally, then if you're producing it in Zambia, of course, with the conveyance cost and getting it back to Kenya, it's likely to arrive or to land back in Kenya at a higher cost because of the transport. So how does that affect the local market?
Dr. Njagi further argues that with more experience in farming, Kenya may be banking on Zambia's high level of productivity to help in sealing the food security loopholes.
Yes, the government has tried to distribute subsidized fertilizer. Unfortunately, much of it is arriving to farmers late. But for those farmers who are not able to access the subsidy fertilizer, for example, the price of fertilizer is quite high. You're talking about DAP going for about 6,500. So although we may end up getting maize, it doesn't necessarily mean that that maize is going to be cheap.
However, the government's decision is troubled by the ongoing crisis in Zambia. The South African country is itself fighting a maize shortage that has been occasioned by drought and floods, especially in the northern parts of the nation. And that is not all. The country's finance minister, in an interview with NTV in Washington, D.C., appeared not aware of the deal. The minister has signed a deal allowing Zambia to import maize.
To supplement whatever we have,
so that the shortages can be alleviated. So to facilitate that, the Treasury has removed taxes and other fees payable on minimal imports.
In Uasin Gishu County, which is a part of Kenya's food basket, the deal has been met with anger and disappointment. Farmers, young and old, are reading malice in the deal.
Hii kasi ni nani anatafutiwa? Hii kasi kwa nini tuende Zambia? Ni kwa nini Wakenya hawajashindwa? Ni nani ako nyuma ya haya? Kwa sababu kwenda Zambia sio suluhisho. Ni kama saa ile kwako kumeshika moto na unalikimbia kwa jirani kumwaga maji na unawaja kwako na vitu inaungua. So wana waziri wa agriculture, sisi tukiwa wakulima tunakuomba, hii ni kutafutia Kenya chakula ama ni kutafutia mtu kazi?
Hii ni biashara ya mtu, hawa ni makatels, wanataka kuharibu biashara ya, wanataka kuharibu wakulima kwa sababu hao wataflood hii nchi, wataflood mahindi ijaye hapa Kenya sana, of which sisi kama wakulima tunakemea na tunakataa, na serikali ijue hatutakubali hiyo maneno.
Kwa sababu serikali ile kitu ambayo ingefikiria number one ni increase what we call production per acre. Na kuna njia mingi tunaweza fanya hivyo. Tukuze wakulima wetu wadogo ndio waweze kufika kwa kiwango ya large scale.
Agriculture is the backbone to our country's economy, and once we decide to do that, literally means that we are eloping what we have in the country to some other country. And looking at the economy right now, that will be a very terrible thing.
In Zambia, there's almost no 2 kg packet of unga, the smallest packet being 5 kg. And hear this, it goes for 250 Kenya shillings. Brian Obuya, NTV.
All right, and that report there by Brian Obuya takes us to take a look at what's making headlines in the dailies before we get into a conversation. And this is what we have on the very front page of the Daily Nation. Of course, that developing story. Raila's agent spills the beans on Paul Loss. An insider's take, they say. Saita Bao Kanchori, who served as the chief agent of Azimio leader Raila Odinga in the general election last year, has thrown the cat among the pigeons with his book, Why Baba is Not the Fifth, in which he tells of the chaos, power struggles and infighting among top campaign managers that ensued at the coalition's command center that was then under President Uhuru Kenyatta's brother, Muhoho Kenyatta. This is on full page 7 of the Daily Nation, and Mr. Odinga has defended his campaign managers, saying the election was rigged, and it is something that he's continued to talk about. We'll come back to that. It's on page 7. On the second page of the Daily Nation, Nairobi Drama Film Champions set for KICD's Winners Contest. It's about the national festivals, which will be held in Mombasa from the 19th to the 29th of April. Moving forward, and we see there the Interior Cabinet Secretary Kindiki Kithure. MPs put Professor Kindiki to task over insecurity, police brutality, and the Cabinet Secretary yesterday faced a barrage of questions from legislators over the rising insecurity in various parts of the country and use of live bullets by police to quell demonstrations. Professor Kindiki, who was the first Cabinet Secretary to answer questions directly from members of Parliament on the floor of the House in the new changes of standing orders, was taken to task by lawmakers on what the government is doing over those killings. You can get that full report there. It is on the third page of the Daily Nation. Just adjacent to that, officer alleges plot to frame her in Maseno shooting incident. An officer who was adversely mentioned in the shooting of a Maseno University student during the anti-government demonstrations was called by Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition leader Raila Odinga on the 20th of March, has claimed that her life is in danger as it emerged she was not in Maseno when the shooting happened. In what appears to be a cover-up to mask the real shooter, senior police officers released the image of the complainant. Through her lawyer, Dansan Omari, Corporal Georgina Osoro is seeking to clear her name from any wrongdoing. All right, this is the fourth page of the Daily Nation. Raila camp fires final warning shot to Ruto over the talks. That's Azimio Chief Raila Odinga's camp, who's fired a final warning to government that successful talks are the only remedy to mass action, even as focus shifted to Parliament to urgently pass a motion granting legitimacy to the bipartisan committee. Opposition leaders say they will not act on the hardline positions by the government side, but will decide whether their rivals are keen to resolve the political crisis once the committee gets down to business. If not, they are vowing to resume the anti-government protests. So what way forward? We're also following up on this story just to see exactly how this will be shaping up. Remember, the dialogue between these two sides is set to begin as soon as Parliament passes a motion to form the ad hoc committee. That's the 14-member team. And MPs train guns on Kenya Power. IPPs of a high cost of electricity. What happened yesterday in Parliament? Well, members of Parliament want the management of Kenya Power investigated of the high cost of electricity, even as they demanded curbs on expensive power purchased from independent power producers. The lawmakers were considering a motion on the high cost of power sponsored by Laikipia Woman Representative Jane Kagiri, which seeks to stop the Ministry of Energy and Kenya Power from getting into any agreements with IPPs until the House makes a decision on the current high cost of electricity. Okay. What else do we have on the 6th page of the Daily Nation? Agency seeks audit of 4 billion KPA pension scheme project. Well, the 4 billion housing project by the giant Mombasa-based Kenya Ports Authority pension scheme is set for a forensic audit following claims of irregularities in the venture. Sources at the Retirement Benefits Authority told Nation that concerns have been raised about the transactions on a project by the pension. Now, the Retirement Benefits Authority probe follows the claims of those irregularities there. So you can get that full report there. It's on the 6th page of the Daily Nation. And adjacent to that, of course, it was what was captured on the very front page of the Daily Nation. Tower of Babel vote hunt team that cost Raila the president. A tell-all by Saita Bao Ole Kanchori, who was the chief agent there of the Azimio party leader Raila Odinga in the August 9th presidential election. He says he's lifted the lead on the behind the scenes, the chaos, the power struggles, the infighting among the top campaign managers that could have cost Raila Odinga the presidency. In his new released book, Why Baba is Not the Fifth, he describes the coalition's election command center that was under then President Uhuru Kenyatta's younger brother Uhuru Kenyatta as a Tower of Babel, revealing an alleged Cold War between former Information and Communication Technology Cabinet Secretary Joe Musheru and former Interior Principal Secretary Karanja Kibicho. So you can get that full report there. It's captured quite well on that's on the 7th page of the Daily Nation. All right, moving forward. Ruto names Kirocho deputy police boss in key changes. President William Ruto yesterday appointed Mr. Douglas Kanja Kirocho the new deputy inspector general of the National Police Service, while he succeeds Edward Mbugua, who proceeded on terminal leave last month. Kirocho, whose tenure as DIG begins immediately, as has been serving as the commandant of the General Service Unit for the last 4 years. It was picked by President Ruto from a list that was presented to him by the National Police Service following interviews for the position last week. And charity launches plan to boost drugs and medical kit supply. You can also get that report there adjacent to that as well. Let me just wind up on this. This is still on Matters National News. What do we have? Electric buses launched to curb emissions. Well, Transport Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen yesterday launched electric buses to operate in Nairobi, a move that the government believes will curb excessive carbon emissions by fossil fuel-powered vehicles. You can see the Transport Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen there doing a test drive on one of the electric buses at Transcom House in Nairobi yesterday. He handed over 15 buses to Matatu Saccos plying Nairobi routes. This is a 25-seater bus which will eventually be introduced in other regions across the country as a basic infrastructure needed for the operation, such as charging and repair stations, are yet to be developed. And expel arsonists to check school fires, says parents. Well, parents want students found to be behind arson attacks in schools expelled to protect other learners. Speaking under the auspices of the National Parents Association, the father asked the Minister of Education to investigate the return of school fires. That's Mr. Silas, who's the chairperson of the parents' lobby, who termed as worrying a recent outbreak of fires wrecking school facilities and that seem planned. And you can get that as well, report. It's just right on the 10th page of the Daily Nation. So I'm going to move forward away from that, and we're going to see what's on the Business Daily. Let me expand my paper. On the Business Daily, this is what we have. KQ risks losing millions to Boeing for planes deposit. Well, Kenya Airways is fighting to save 310 million shilling deposit it made with US plane maker Boeing Corporation for aircraft purchases after the expiry of the preservation period rendered the deposit non-refundable. The airline disclosed in its annual report for the year ending December 2022 that it risks losing the millions of shillings given deposits made for plane purchases are not refundable if a carrier fails to buy those planes. So the loss-making carrier has made a 310 million provision, an amount set aside from a company's profit to cover an unexpected liability for failing to purchase the undisclosed planes. Still on Business Daily, what else do we have? Multimedia University keeps dorms without pay for up to 5 years. That's the Multimedia University of Kenya, now asking unpaid lecturers to swap debts of millions of shillings in salary arrears, some running as far back as 5 years, with school fees of their kin at the institution amid a biting cash crunch threatening to ground the institution's operations. Also, Jumia Kenya reports 11 billion shilling loss, and investors undervalue bank despite increased earnings. Okay, this is where we wind up on the Business Daily. I'm going to take us to Taifa Leo now, and they've decided to use an English word. I don't know what Plan B is in Swahili, but that's what they've termed in quotes. Plan B ya Raila baada ya mpango maridhiano kati yake na Rais Ruto kukumbwa na visiki vingi, Odinga ageukia mikutano. And you can see there the image of the Azimio la Umoja Chief Raila Odinga. Kiongozi wa muungano wa Azimio la Umoja Raila Odinga onekana kusuka mikakati chini ya maji kurejea katika maandamano iwapo mazungumzo ya maridhiano kati ya muungano huo na upinzani na ule unaotawala wa Kenya Kwanza yatagonga ukuta. So you can get that full report on the second page of the Taifa Leo newspaper, and you can see a couple of faces there in that picture that depicts the story. And also, Gachagua azidisha ziara zake za kusaka ubabe Mlima Kenya. You can also get that full report on the second page of Taifa Leo. Okay, on the East African, what do we have? Wave of change blows across East Africa. That's what we have. This is that publication for the week between the 8th of April to the 14th of April, before we get another one, of course. So the wave of change blows across East Africa. Region's main political parties cede roles to younger leaders in bid to stay in power and pacify a restless generation. This is on pages 4 to 5. You can see a number of faces there. The East African states leaders. You have Paul Kagame of Rwanda, Samia Suluhu, who's the Tanzania president, Yoweri Museveni, Uganda's president, as well as William Ruto, who's the president of Kenya. Also still on this publication of the East Africa, DRC reviews bad mining contracts with China. Finance Minister Nicolas Kazadi says the deals in question are skewed in favor of Beijing. You can get that report as well. And also, is shadowy Belgian man taking Ruto for a ride? I don't know. That's also something you can find out on the East African. So I'm going to take us back to the Daily Nation. Just leave it here. I think there's a report on the issues of school, because I think that's something we might be having a conversation around as we take a look at the issue of safety, on health and safety of learners in schools. Now, well, just a little away from that, and before I introduce my panelists this morning, The abrupt closure of at least 2 schools in Kakamega County of a suspected food poisoning and cholera outbreak, which was then suspected in as many days, is a cause for concern and calls for a serious assessment on the safety of students at school. Well, at least 3 students, 3 deaths were reported from Sacred Heart Mukumu Girls High School just days after suspected food poisoning that saw 244 other students hospitalized, and further reports of the closure of Butere Boys after about 100 students were reported to have exhibited almost similar symptoms. What is the state of health and safety of learners in schools, and what are the remedial measures that will ensure their safety? That's the conversation we're having this morning. I'm not alone in studio. I am joined by Dr. Teresa Kinyari Mwendwa, who's the chair of the Public Health Society of Kenya. A very good morning. Welcome to the studio. And also we are joined by Catherine Asego, who is a research officer at APHRC. That's the Africa Population Health Research Center. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We'll also be joined a little bit later by Joshua Changwoni, who's the Executive Director, CRECO Kenya. And I just want to get, first of all, as we begin this conversation, your assessment of the situation. I'm going to begin with you, Dr. Teresa. I know you've been trying to gather a little bit more information on exactly what transpired. Maybe you can shed some more light for us on what you found out, at least from a public health perspective. What might have gone wrong?
Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for this discussion. I think the key thing is that it's multifactorial. There are many factors, and we basically cannot be able to pin down on even food poisoning. And I think we just need to go back to the science, because the gut has about 100 trillion bacteria, which of course will change over time depending on what you eat, and maybe antibiotics and antacids that may be taken, and even stress. So based on the information that we are reading, there's really you can't really put a finger on one specific bacteria. It's really multifactorial. So think about, for example, the food that is eaten in the schools. Most of the maize is stored in granaries, and there's always the risk of aflatoxin poisoning. And usually with aflatoxin, if you get acute aflatoxosis, you'd actually be able to get diarrhea and a lot of gut infection.
Because I think the committee that was actually formed to probe the incident, I believe they established that there was a chemical that was used as a preservative. I've forgotten the name, but it was used to preserve the cereals. So that might have perhaps been the cause of the food poisoning that we saw at least the Mukumu Girls School.
Yeah, studies done by KEMRI, and basically they looked at the Rift Valley and lower eastern Kenya. They actually looked at the post-harvest behavior of most of the farmers, and out of about 585 kilograms of harvested maize, about 20 kilograms were actually either discolored or rotten. And what they found out is that most farmers, 31% of the farmers threw it away, which is what you'd expect, but you have another 7% who fed it to the cows, and we have another 11.5% who fed it to the chicken. So just imagining that, according to the school health policy, we basically have the sources of food being what the children will eat in school, what the students will eat in school, what the parents bring, and in some schools, there are some parents who are not allowed to bring in schools. And then the third source is small vendors that are in the neighborhood of the schools. So I just imagining that this is the same farmer providing cereal, providing cow's milk, and providing eggs, and we all have all that contamination along the food chain.
Right.
So we basically cannot be able to put a finger, because also in school, children get headaches, they get stomach upsets, they go to the school nurse, get antibiotics, and also there's the stress factor. Because in the gut we have about, for every 1 cubic centimeter, we have about 10,000 bacteria, which are normal, and they'll basically say, hey, what is this? You know, what is going on? And when you get a leak, then of course you'll end up with bloating, diarrhea, and it's a whole process of an imbalance, which we call dysbiosis.
Right.
Yeah.
Catherine, from, just looking at how the situation unfolded, and, Dr. Teresa says, this is not like issues with the gastrointestinal problems are quite common in school because of all these things that learners are exposed to, different types of food and all these things. So then from where you sit, you know, first of all, as a general perspective, where do you think the issue is in terms of that health, that safety and health that we provide for our learners in schools?
Thank you very much. I think, first of all, this discussion is very timely because of what we've seen happening in our schools. And as a parent, my heart really goes out to the parents who, you know, their learners are affected, as well as the learners themselves and even the schools. For me, when you look at the school setup, schools are supposed to be safe learning spaces for the learners, because when you look at the amount of time they spend in the school setup, some of these learners are coming from dysfunctional families, for instance, and they usually look up to the school to be able to provide that kind of safe environment. They interact with their peers. They get to grow, be it socially or even physically, so to speak. So schools should really endeavor to be able to provide that kind of safe environment for the learners to be able to, you know, feel that like they belong and inculcate that culture of a safe environment. Because when you look at the school setup, school safety is a very integral part of the learning and even the teaching process. Because if the learners feel that they are unsafe, if the teachers feel that they are unsafe, there is no, you know, meaningful education that, you know, and learning that can go on in the school setup. So I think we really need to look at our school setup and look at how best we are implementing even the policies that Daktari has talked about, the school health policy. Is this being implemented at the level that it should actually be implemented? So I think we need to really come back to the drawing board and see how can we be able to support even the school administrators to make sure that the policies that we have in place are actually being put in place and being implemented to safeguard.
Where do you think the challenge lies? We already have a very clear policy in terms of this, but the gaps are quite big at this point. So then what are some of these challenges we need to first address to be able to fill that gap?
Okay, first and foremost, I'd like to bring it back to the school health policy that Daktari talked about. When you look at the spirit behind the crafting of the policy, there was a lot of collaboration between the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health, and even the Ministry of Public Works and so forth, because under the school health policies, we have the clear roles on what each person should be able to do. But when it comes to implementation, there has been a gap, especially in terms of networking and coordination, which has really killed the spirit of implementation of that particular policy. So yes, we have very clear guidelines and everybody needs to know what their roles are, but are we really implementing these set guidelines, these policies that are supposed to safeguard our children at the end of the day? That is a very big question. In addition to that, when we look at the different governance structures at the school setup, because they also have a role to play in ensuring compliance of these particular policies and even the guidelines. Number one, do they even know of the existence of such policies? Number two, do they have the capacity, even the schools, do they have the capacity to be able to implement these policies? If something like this happens, for instance, how can they be able to, you know, go to the county education officials or even the Ministry of Health and tell them, you know, we are facing this particular challenge at the school level? Do we have those pathways for the schools to be able to interact and work together within the school setup? Because if you work in silos, there's really nothing much you can be able to do to be able to curb these issues of school safety that you're seeing.
Right. So this is certainly like exactly what Dr. Teresa said, multi-sectoral kind of an approach to be able to address this issue. Well, Dr. Teresa, you know, we have environmental factors that we cannot escape that have an impact on, because you're speaking from a public health perspective, the health of learners across the country. Some of them we cannot escape. For example, the issue of unsafe water sources. One of the issues I think that was raised was the fact that the water that was being the water they were getting for the school was from a nearby stream. So you have these students who are actually drinking water from the spring, which is quite unsafe. So then how do we begin addressing some of these challenges? Because you have schools that are still struggling. You have a high transition rate in schools. We'll talk about infrastructure a little bit later in terms of that. That's because that's one of the biggest challenges we have. But because of the fact that we have so many students and you have probably the capacity and the resource of schools that are not able to cater perhaps to all the students, you know, it's easier to just get water from the nearby water source to be able to give to these learners. So then how do we begin addressing that?
I think that's a big one. It's a real challenge because it really depends on the capacity of the school to be able to treat water. Because for me, that would be the most important thing. Because outside the school, they have no control about the river and basically what happens. We know there's contamination with sewage. With devolution, I think with more opening up of the counties and more activities, even with the agricultural activities, with drought, of course, thank God the rains are here. We basically would expect more infections like cholera, contamination because of scarcity of water. But for what I think is that, for example, if schools are going to use bowsers, and usually you find that even if you have bowsers, you're never really sure where the bowsers are getting the water. But ultimately, it would be prudent to treat the water at the school and make sure that even the water used for washing and drinking, because students really cannot be able to distinguish, water should be clean all the way. I think water treatment would be really important, and also just to be able to separate what is drunk and what is actually used for washing. Because again, treatment is expensive, so it may be easier to just treat what is available. But again, like you say, in terms of resources, for me, I feel the alumni should actually come in, because the water issue is just one bit of it. The environment, like you say, is really important, like making sure that we have enough toilets with more students, and even the way we have solid and human waste disposal. We know that human waste can be used for agriculture to grow vegetables to help the school, but again, that would need a lot of intervention by environmentalists to make sure that it works.
It's a whole process.
Yes, it's a whole process.
Right. Let me hear from Catherine on the same, because this is quite a big issue, and it comes to you know, ensuring that by the time that we're giving these learners that safe environment, it is up to standard. Why do you think we're failing on that standard, especially because water is a really big issue, and it cuts across, because we've had so many cases of students who got sick because of amoebiosis and other things that are related to water sources. Where do we need to address on that, apart from, you know, treating water sources? Are there any other methods schools can learn from?
I think at the piggyback on the issue of partnership, because when learners are exposed to unsafe drinking water, as you've already seen, or even unsafe food, chances of them falling ill are very high. And we've actually even seen deaths being reported, which is quite unfortunate. Within the school setup, there are those factors that are within the school's control, and there are those externalities that are perhaps beyond the school's control. For instance, the issue of water that Daktari mentioned. However, I think the schools need to really think about putting in place mechanisms that can help them address some of these issues. Because when you look at the situation, we have a knee-jerk kind of response to some of the issues that we're seeing. The partnership,
and that's what we have actually seen.
Yes, the partnership that I was actually talking about between the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health. If there is an outbreak within a community where the school is, I believe that the health practitioners will be the first point of call, will be the first people to actually know that there is something happening. Can they be able to give this information to the schools so that they can either put in place preventive measures or even resort to closing down of the schools? Because she mentioned that, for instance, water treatment is very expensive and so forth. However, if the school is not able to ensure that the water and the food that they're giving the learners is up to standards and fit for human consumption, why can't they think about even closing down the schools for them to actually make sure that they get a solution before, you know, learning continues? And it's quite interesting, because I don't know whether it's like the numbers were not reported, because I didn't really see whether there were any teachers or even non-teaching staff in those schools who were admitted because of, you know, the unsafe water and food. Because I know in some schools, actually, the learners and the teachers, you know, sort of eat from the same pot. So what are we seeing here? Is it a case of the storage you talked about? There are standards and policies and guidelines that really help us to be able to make sure that we safeguard the learners. Are we following this up? if there is a lack of that kind of support, what can we do with the different partners and stakeholders, even development partners, to be able to come on the table and see how best we can be able to pool resources and really support schools, because the safety of our learners should be the #1 priority for us.
In learning institutions.
Yes.
So then you bring up the question of, before we take a break, of course, is the issue of then this effective and ongoing surveillance and monitoring in schools to look at the gaps that are there, what are some of the issues that need to be addressed immediately, and of course the long-term solutions as well. We have to take a very short break here on AM Live NTV. Talk to us. The hashtag is AM Live NTV. We're going to be back in a very short while. At NTV Kenya, at Zainab Ismail, we'll continue with the conversation. Stay with us.
Oya ni aje wazee, watu wangu wa power, DJ hapa hivi kama kawaida. You know how we do it kwenye radio yako 96.3 Nation FM, where good music lives. DJ Mo, DJ Kamuzi alongside MC Jawochi, the host with the most. Au sio?
DJ Kamuzi, the musical chef. She wants to be like.
Kutoka radio mtu wangu tunaingia kwenye TV na pale hivyo tunaletea ngoma zingine Ital 2, tunaletea mpaka guests all over the world kutoka Jamaica, Kenya, East Africa, name them. Ama ni aje Mo?
Yes I, na kama kawaida sisi kama Jam Down tuingia kwenye area kwenye mtaa yako mazee. Jam Down on the road mazee, tuambie ukuje wapi?
Jawochi kila sato anakuletea reggae news, what's trending.
Yeah, this and much more from 7 p.m. Nation FM.
Alafu kuanzia 10 mpaka maidha mtu wangu #JamDownKE. Awola. Want to bring me down, was sick and tired, then you came.
To get Uinuliwe by Bide, dial *811 *936#. Skiza na Nation.
You're going to take your oxtail and then you're going to brown it.
While football is an emotional game, there is no longer any true romance at the top end, and nobody should be fooled that there is. So, while there is emotion attached to Frank Lampard's return to Chelsea as manager, there is actually no romance. After all, for Lampard and especially for Chelsea, this is purely a business decision.
The London Marathon, 23rd April, live on NTV.
If she found out that I have a son and a criminal record, she'd never even talk to me. I know that.
You were always dedicated to your work. You never cared about fame. Using these methods, What for?
I like it when people are enthusiastic about their job and the industry. But you are plain rude. You have to follow the rules, the chain of command, whether you're family or not. Do you understand?
Western Union is now available on Equity Mobile app and Equity Online. Enjoy Western Union services and other banking services on your Equity Mobile app or Equity Online. Equity, Karibu member.
All right, welcome back to the program. You're watching AM Live on NTV as we canvass around the issue of health and safety of learners in schools. I'm not alone in studio. I'm with Dr. Teresa Kinyari Mwendwa, who's the chair of the Public Health Society of Kenya, as well as Catherine Asego, who's a research officer at African Population Health Research Center. Thank you, ladies, for staying with us. I'm just going to read out a comment that was shared by one of our readers on the Daily Nation, and who shared their opinion on some of these issues, called Pansela Wawira from Kakamega. She says, at schools and other institutions that serve food have a responsibility to ensure that it is fit for human consumption. That includes proper preparation, storage and handling of food, as well as regular inspections to identify and address risks. The food must be cooked thoroughly and served in a clean environment, but also parents and students must also take responsibility for their health and well-being by taking steps to reduce poisoning risks. The incident resulted in the abrupt closure of the school to protect the other students. So that calls for proper sanitation and the protection of food. So, Dr. Teresa, when we're talking about food poisoning, how bad is it? How serious is food poisoning? Is it like, okay, of course we've seen it's life-threatening because we've seen people who've lost their lives, students, but tell us how important it is to be educated on the importance of food safety.
I think that's a very important thing, and as Catherine alluded to, we have a school policy which has stipulated guidelines on who should get the training and what should be done, both by the schools and also by the community. I think first thing is to really educate the cooks, the food handlers, because we've talked about it may not be easy to inspect the food that is delivered to the schools, but the food handlers usually should have an inspection certificate, for the food handling certificate, which of course has a cost attached to it, which the school may not be able to bear, and this would be one of the things that school alumni can actually take, because if you have, especially even for the long-serving cooks, if you're able to, sometimes you just assume they are okay since they've been here long enough, but I think being able to get that regular habit of food handling certificates, so as the principal is checking who has paid fees, they also need to check who has the most recent certificate, and that is really important.
So
because
sometimes it's not just about the fact that the food was contaminated. The food might be just completely fine, but it depends on how that food was handled.
Yes,
that's what you're saying.
Yes, and I think it's one thing that is really easy to do, because it's all about awareness. We have the public health offices that provide the service, and they can even be able to come to the school to take the samples. And for me, I don't know that you remember, much earlier there was the issue about typhoid Mary and even cholera, how cholera was discovered even in the UK. You really have just one source, and that could affect everyone in the community. And as public health specialists at the Public Health Society of Kenya, we really look into solutions, working with stakeholders, as Catherine has said, to be able to come up with solutions, because health economics is one of the aspects of public health. There's also the social aspects, and even allowing the community or even the school nurse to be able to deal with, to have some responders, to get some training on how to respond to food poisoning is really important, because it inevitably may happen, but how does the school especially the school nurse, have they been trained to be an emergency responder, which is really a basic thing? Do they have the basic medicine to be able to deal with that? And even how are they able to follow up the chain? Most of the time you find that we don't expect some of these things to happen, and therefore we don't do training. So I think with the Ministry of Health, working together with the Ministry of Education, we should be able to train nurses on being fast responders. Right. But also within the students' community, we can actually come up with champions for cleanliness. There are many WASH programs working in the community, but they really focus on the ASAL and the places where there's not enough water and sanitation. But they have a role, because a school is a captive community. They are not going anywhere. They are there for several months, as Catherine said. Children spend more time in school than they spend at home. Right. So I really want to challenge the NGOs working in WASH to be able to pick up the schools as one of their objectives. And even most of the corporate organizations, they do a lot of CSRs. They help in expanding the school, but more important, they can actually focus on food safety and also training. Because I believe that if students take up the responsibility, they would actually be able to work within themselves, to be able to police themselves to ensure that there's safety.
Right. Catherine, I see you agree with the fact that we actually need more training. And just to mention, by the way, the Ministry of Health, when they went to pay a visit at the Sacred Heart Mukumu Girls, they said they will be issuing guidelines on the handling of foodstuff in schools. So that cuts across all schools. But training, very important.
Yes, I actually would like to pick up from what Daktari has mentioned with regards to the need for the school and also the community to have that sense of collective responsibility and collective action, because the school is an ecosystem. Okay, so everybody should feel the need for everybody to take responsibility for food handling, because, for instance, and also the issues of health and safety. Because, for instance, yes, in as much as health education programs are important in schools, we give the learners the requisite information that they need to be able to, you know, look out and also report cases of perhaps cases that affect their health while in the school level. But when you look at learners, they're not able to, for instance, go to the kitchen to look at how the food is being handled. If we tell the learners that this is how you're supposed to wash your hands, for example, but the school administration or we do not support them with water, with soap, and the requisite infrastructure, it will be very difficult for them to be able to, you know, really benefit from behavior change practices and so forth. So I think it's very important for us to really look at how best we can tap into the roles of the different players.
Right, before you continue, when you talk about collective responsibility when it comes to, you know, school, which is an ecosystem, but we must have where a buck stops, right? When we have such cases happening within the school environment, where then does the buck stop? Is it the principal? Is it the teacher? Is it the parent? Is it the board of, you know, management of the school? Where does the buck stop? Is it the Ministry of Health? Is it the Ministry of Education? Because we need someone to take the lead on this, do we?
When you talk about the school setup, and when the learner is in the school, I would, as a parent, know that the teacher and the school administration step in and act as parents at that particular level, okay? So they really need to be the first ones to see how best they can put in place mechanisms to safeguard the children. Before now we come back to, you know, the community as a whole, and also looking at how best we can rope in the public health officials and so forth, okay? The school administration and also the teachers are the ones who know what happens within the school setup. They're the ones who should actually encourage that culture of school safety within the students, within the staff, within the teachers themselves, so that we can bring about that, you know, collective responsibility. But the buck for me stops with the school administration. And when I talk about the school administration, I'm also bringing on board the boards of management, the parents associations, because community members should be part and parcel of these governance structures. So in a way, we're also bringing on board the communities and also the parents, because they also have a role to play in as far as their children are concerned. So the school administration should really make sure that they provide the safeguards that are needed for us to be able to keep our children in school and to keep them safe.
Right. Dr. Teresa, when we're talking about the issue of surveillance and monitoring systems within our schools, that appears to be a bit of a challenge in terms of how we are addressing it here in the country. This is a big one because this is how we are able to respond to the health issues that erupt from our different schools. Then how can we begin to put in place measures to make sure that we have an effective, from where you sit, you know, as a public health expert, you know, policy-wise, you know, technical-wise, how do we begin to ensure effective surveillance and monitoring of these issues within the school so that we can be able then to abruptly respond to, for example, what happened in some of those schools?
For me, I think, like Catherine said, the board is really very important because currently the public health or departments are doing the normal routine monitoring. For example, there's a group that actually found that the school store cereals and grains for more than a whole term. So like we are in second term, they actually have stored grain until the end of the term. So you find that sometimes they give the reports, but we are not sure whether the board receives these reports, and even if they do they have the capacity? And this is where, as Catherine says, the partnership comes in. Because I've been a member of a PTA many years ago in my daughter's school, and the key challenge for principals and even boards is to feed the children, to keep the children in school. So there are these other things that really the school would actually need care. For example, in terms of monitoring food safety, we have standards that are set, and the key thing is that the standards need to be enforced. So like you ask, where does the buck stop? Who should we blame? I think the principals are really carrying a lot on their shoulders, and it all comes back to them. But I believe the boards and the alumni should actually take it up, because the problem is that resources are scarce, and putting in measures to actually what is happening within the school and working together with the public health departments would actually be very important, because different schools have different challenges, and some challenges can be dealt with immediately, other challenges are long term. For example, getting a borehole from the school, ensuring that even the borehole is treated, and even just ensuring that, for example, if a food vendor does not provide safe food, to be bold enough to change the vendor. You know, some vendors have a long-term contract, so it doesn't matter what they provide. And I feel for me, as a school board, you should basically need to be able to work with the public health department, ask for these reports, and really try and find out how that is done. So I think if the school boards were able to request for monitoring and evaluation report from the public health departments, that would actually be very important, because they actually do the work.
Right.
Yeah.
Catherine, you agree with the same, that we actually need these reports, at least for the schools to be able to see how to begin addressing some of the gaps that they're facing. I'm going to read out, I think this was a report was done also still on the Daily Nation. It's a guest blog by Wanyonyi Simbaoni, who says that first, overcrowding in particularly public learning institutions is a pervasive issue. So then you have the issue of the lack of clean water and sanitation facilities, which makes maintaining proper hygiene and sanitation quite difficult, further increasing the risk of disease among students. So let the government prioritize the health and safety of students. The Ministry of Education and Health must work together to ensure learning institutions comply with the health and safety regulations. But then they wouldn't know if there was no report to clearly guide them on the challenges and the gaps that are there.
Actually, I think I'd like to come back to the policies that you're talking about, the guidelines and so forth. Because, for instance, from the Ministry of Education, there is a guideline on when you're establishing a school. How should the class sizes look like in the dormitories? Should we have double beds? Should we have, you know, the decker beds and so forth? How many learners should be able to use a toilet, for instance, water and sanitation facilities? All are, you know, clearly defined within the guidelines and the policies that we currently have. But when it comes to implementation, that is where now things start falling through the cracks. Because yes, you've talked about the high, you know, the push to have all children transitioning or accessing schools. But at the same time, are we increasing the number of teachers, for example, who are going to cater to the students? Are we ensuring that the infrastructure that the school has will be able to, you know, handle and be commensurate to the needs of the higher enrollment that you're actually seeing in the particular schools? So in as much as we want to push for compliance of these particular policies, I think the ministry also needs to see how best they can be able to support the schools. Number one, for them to be able to comply. And also,
do you think we need regular inspections in schools?
Actually, that is something.
Is that happening? I doubt if that is.
That is something that is mandatory. That is something that should actually happen, because we have quality assurance and standards officers who are expected to visit schools, expected to work even with public health officers who, you know, visit schools to be able to look at the health and safety of learners and so forth. So we actually have these resources. However, I know there are issues that they will talk about funding and so forth for them to be able to actually do the work. But the roles are very clear on the different levels of monitoring. The roles are very clear for the teachers and the school administration, you know, the public health officials, the quality assurance and standards officials. So we need an accountability mechanism to make sure that everybody is doing what they should be doing, and everybody should be supported to actually do their work and do it well. Because at the end of the day, the safety of the learners should, you know, be our #1 priority. Yeah.
But I feel like there is not a very clear picture or guidelines in terms of the framework that we have on the responsibilities of the stakeholders when you're talking about, you know, the teachers, the students, the parents, the board of management. I feel like there's a bit of either laxity or there's overlapping of responsibility. At that point, that's when perhaps then we have these issues, because at the end of it all, we must see, you know, we can be able to specify the consequences of the default of, you know, some of these issues. Do you feel like we need more clarity in terms of the responsibility and guidelines that have been set out in the standards, in the regulations?
Yes, I'd actually term it as a disconnect between the different policies, for instance, the school health policy.
Because then you also have individual schools who have their own set of regulations and how each stakeholder is involved. But then you also have the national policy as well.
Yes. For the schools, they need to draw their, you know, customize their policies at the school level, but based on the national guidelines and the policies from the Ministry of Education and from the Ministry of Health, for example. The school health policy is very clear about the roles of the different actors. But I would say, do these actors actually even know about these roles? Are they aware of these policies?
So
she talked about
the issue of training.
Exactly, she talked about sensitization. You know, for you to be able to implement, for instance, guidelines and policies. #1, you need to be aware. #2, you need to appreciate your role. #3, you need to be supported, and also you need to, by support I mean, you know, the regular quality assurance from the quality assurance and standards officers and even the curriculum support officers. For instance, for you to be able to make sure that nothing falls through the crack. So I think I'd put it as a disconnect between the various policies, you know, that might make people feel like there is that kind of overlap in terms of responsibilities on who is supposed to do what. So I think for me, I'd take it back to, you know, that kind of disconnect. The school policy, the Ministry of Education has guidelines about setting up of and establishment of infrastructure, for instance. What does the school health policy say about the same, you know? Are they speaking to each other? And are these two ministries, for example, health and education, talking to each other about, we set out to jointly make sure that we safeguard our learners in this particular way? Are we working together? Are we networking? Are we coordinating our efforts? You know, because if you work in silos, there is a very big possibility of you, #1, wasting resources, for example, and even not being sure how to even document and look at the impact of these different programs that are all meant to safeguard the learners.
Right. Dr. Teresa, I mean, when we're still trying to look at the issue of monitoring and evaluation, who else do we need to bring on board apart from all these people always speak about? The most basic primary stakeholders that we know are the principal, the board of management, so the people who are supposed to ensure that these guidelines have been, you know, followed. But then also, do we need more? Do we need to increase that space to add more in terms of collaboration?
Actually, that's very true. As public health specialists, we basically look at the bigger picture. For example, if someone buys a land and builds a factory, we should actually be able to do, I know the environmental impact assessment is normally done, but the town and county planners also need to be involved. Again, like you're saying, devolution is with us, and towns are opening up. We have more cities now. And so basically...
So even aside from health, then there's the safety issue. Remember, there have been cases of, you know, the buildings, schools collapsing and students dying because of that. So then there's that also aspect of the safety, their safety, physical safety of students as well.
So I believe that we have quite a number of people we need to get in, to get on board, and it's really about creating that environment and collaboration that the students should have. And also the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of, Catherine has talked about overcrowding, which is inevitable because we must have the 100% transition, but there must be ways in which, for example, corporates or even NGOs working in the area can chip in to be able to assist the schools. Of course, like you say, schools are different levels, so some schools may have a greater need than others, but I think is thinking about your neighbor and really trying to ensure that whether it's noise, pollution, because if you have the same river that the students are getting the food, then of course, I mean the water, then of course, and you have a factory, you have land use and a lot of other things going on, then of course, inevitably, you'll actually get contamination. So being able to be responsible, having an environmental day to be able to look at what is happening in the community. There are costs involved. For example, the company would need to have costs in terms of disposal, which they do, but it's all about involving everyone. And again, also, I feel we also need to own the process and not pass the buck, where as partners, we basically say, I'll do this, I'll do that, and so inevitably that is what should happen.
Right. Yeah. Catherine, let me bring in a little bit of a different aspect of still on the issue of safety of learners in schools. Now, this is with regards to some different incidences we've seen recently. Just yesterday, a student in Nyabisia Secondary School in Kisii was hospitalized following corporal punishment for allegedly flaunting exam rules. At this point, allegedly 5 teachers are reported to have pounced and kicked him and hit him, tied him to a log, and eventually caused severe damage to his private parts. Now, last month, I don't know if you saw this, again, there was a young man, a boy, who died at Chemasa Secondary School in Nandi after he was allegedly beaten by his teachers over cheating during the midterm examination. And away from that, then there was another report here, if I can get it, an example of another tragic story of a young girl called Njoki from the Njoro Girls Secondary School in Nakuru, who died also under mysterious circumstances, allegedly that the student's death was a result of negligence by the school nurse who did not attend to her when she sought treatment at the school's sanatorium for ailment. These are just a couple of incidences that we've highlighted in the media with regard to how learners, you know, operate within schools. From your assessment, then, you know, there have been many questions from the Parents Association as well. How safe are our schools, our students, our learners, our pupils within the school setup? Do you think, is there an issue? Should we be focusing on something? Is there a miss somewhere?
Yes, there is a very big issue because, as I said before, schools are supposed to be safe zones. You know, learners are coming from dysfunctional families, they're coming from very different circumstances, even at community level. So when they come to school and they do not feel safe, the issue of corporal punishment, for example, and even, you know, not being able to ensure the safety of learners, this is something that is quite unfortunate. And I think it is very important for the school administration and even the teachers not to cover up for their colleagues, you know. There are instances where you go to a school and they try and cover up and say probably this and this is what happened to the learner, which is not the case. So I think the Ministry of Education really needs to look at what exactly is happening in the schools. We have alternative ways of disciplining learners, you know, that does not have to necessarily resort to corporal punishment, and the case you're talking about, the learner being injured and so forth. Because if we are the ones supposed to safeguard the children in the school setup, and we are the ones who are perpetrating that, you know, kind of unhealthy environment, what are we saying, you know? So I think the Ministry of Education really needs to weigh in heavily, and even work with local administration officers, because this is a criminal case. You know, if the learner is injured to a certain extent, if there is death as a result of that kind of punishment, this is a criminal case. So again, there is that need for us to really look at how best we can work together at that particular school level, so that we can make sure we safeguard our learners at all costs.
At all costs, all right. So we're going to take yet another break here on AM Live. When we come back, we'll continue with the conversation and just try to figure out some of the remedial measures we can be able to put in place to ensure a more, you know, conducive environment for learners and other stakeholders within the education sector in the country. So we'll take that short break. We're going to be back in a short while. Please.
Dad, what made you decide to become a doctor?
It's because my father needed one. And you, what do you want to be when you grow up?
I want to be happy like you.
Life insured is love assured.
Ni nini Otis? Pesa ya sadaka huwa inaendea nani? Inaendea Mungu. Na si ulisema Mungu ndiye anatupatianga pesa? Kwani tena tunamrudishia tena kwani? Hapana Otis. Pastor! Kwa kina Mariam anakulanga sadaka na mimi nakataza. Otis, wewe sio pastor, unasikia? Pastor ndo anakubaliwa kukula sadaka. Mimi nataka kukua pastor. Otis, huwezi kuwa pastor juu ya sadaka. Hiyo ni kazi ya Mungu, unasikia? Basi baba Mariam basa waache kukula sadaka, mimi pia nitawaacha. Otis, unakulanga sadaka.
To get pesa ya sadaka by Flacco, dial *811*923#. Skiza na Nation.
Good morning, rise and shine. Thank you for being with us dark and early on the Morning Fix. My name is David Ayuke.
And I am Mariam Bashar. This is where good music lives, and guaranteed your weekday mornings are never going to be the same again.
Wake up to the sound of David and Mariam on Nation FM.
Every single day.
They're your morning hosts with the most, bringing you the energy you need to start your day. Nation FM, where good music lives.
Let me see y'all.
Dance.
We partner with communities across all 47 counties by advancing education, by enhancing healthcare, by supporting economic opportunities. Because when we unite, there's nothing we can't do.
My baby is famous for her happy dancing moves because she's always happy. What's the reason for this happiness? Molfix dryness. It's what all mothers dream of. Come on, mothers, try Molfix baby diapers and be part of our happiness movement.
Western Union is now available on Equity Mobile app and Equity Online. Enjoy Western Union services and other banking services on your Equity Mobile app or Equity Online. Equity, Karibu member.
All right, thank you for staying with us. You're watching AM Live on NTV as we continue with our conversation on the issue of the safety and health of learners in our institutions across the country. And also joining us this morning in the panel is Joshua Changwoni, who is the Executive Director, CRECO Kenya, which is a Constitution and Reform Education Consortium. Thank you so much, Joshua, for joining us. I know it was raining quite heavily.
You're most welcome.
But you're good. You're still on time. No worries. Yeah. So I just want to also just get your general assessment on some of the things that have been happening in our schools. You saw of a report that happened at the Sacred Hearts Girls, Mukumu Girls High School. You saw Butere Boys, also secondary school. There have been issues of food safety there. Let's begin with the issue of the health and the food safety that have been there. 3 students have actually died at the Mukumu Girls Secondary School. From your assessment, from where you sit, where do you think the problem lies? We've had a conversation on that. We've gotten to understand how there might have been an issue there in terms of food handling, a bit of training issue, a bit of clarity in terms of the policy that we have. But from where you sit, where do you think the disconnect is?
Yeah, thank you very much, Zainab. A school is a public space, just like a supermarket. The healthy and safety measures that they are put in a supermarket should also be found in a school, because a school is a gathering of various contributing stakeholders, the pupils or the students, the teachers, the visitors, the support staff, and even the stakeholders that probably enable those children to be in schools, such as the guardians and sponsors.
Yeah.
But I think, let me disclose that I am a member of a board of management of a secondary school in West Pokot, and also a member of board of management of a local polytechnic, and also a parent. The healthy and safety measures is not really something that is on the priority. You know, the discussion that normally happens in schools is premised on, passing of exams. We have good teachers. Our children passed very well, and all that. But the
priority is quite different.
But we never discuss these issues around safety and healthy issues. And to begin with is that majority of our schools do not have healthy and safety policy. And for this case, I say that with a lot of regret. The recent incidents in our schools is not new. This is not just something that happened the other day, that we think probably does not happen in the early 2090s and wherever. Bombolulu and the Changuli in this country really reminds us of a very sorry state of how we lost lives, young lives, people would have built this nation. Even at this time now, probably I think they would be in their prime age. But this discussion is very important and is very urgent, that even as we discuss and say the government can do this, I don't think the government, let's say for instance the Teacher Service Commission and the Ministry of Education, through the principal or the head teacher, is present in the school on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
But who are the owners and the practitioners of healthy and safety? Let's even begin from where food is made in a school. I mean, that environment. If, for instance, let's say, for instance, you are running a business on food where you rely on customers to come and buy your food and enabling them also to come back again. Do our children enjoy the food they eat in school? I mean, let's ask ourselves from that. And what contributes that? Is it the issue of the menu or the issue even of the environment which this food is being made? And even not necessarily even where the food is being made, even the storage. I am a maize farmer, And the extension officers in the field normally educates farmers not to preserve maize from attack of weevils by using chemicals which are found in the agrovet, because at the end of it all, it has a net effect on the consumers. Which are these other safety measures that we can use in storing this food, such as maize, in our schools? Because that is where the problem starts. Because if you have a high level of aflatoxin, which is found in the food stores, where maize have not been, and remember, this is a procurement process. So the discussion is about where the maize procured in a proper manner. We don't go beyond to say, were they stored in a safety manner to enable anybody who is consuming that food in the school to be of proper health.
Okay, so there's a chain.
There's a chain. There's a chain. It's not only even that last incident where we've lost life, whatever, something. We must interrogate even from where we produce. We can even go as far as the farms. Because, you know, we've been driven by profits. You know, we deliver this number of maize, we have this number of bags of maize in our stores, we can keep us for the next 6 months, but we don't interrogate to say, even those 6 months that we are waiting to consume this food, is it within the provisions of the public healthy, let's say, measures that are supposed to be there?
So it comes from production.
It comes from production.
Storage.
Yes.
To food handling.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and then the other thing is the culture that we have. I think even as a parent, when we send these children to schools, let's say, for instance, the boarding schools and the day schools, do we ever ask ourselves, how is the safety of our children in this school? Because you are a stakeholder, you pay school fees. You're having this child dedicated for this number of months in this school before a break to interact with this child. So even you as a parent, what is your contribution in terms of inculcating safety and healthy measures to this? Of course, children can be very choosy on probably what they want to eat, but you as a parent, you need to be convinced that where you are sending your child is even on the record, your mental record, that this child is safe in terms of probably even the menu of the school, in terms of the, let's say, where this child is going even to sleep. Because again, even these diseases that we are talking about, and I'm so unfortunate sometimes when we lose a child, then we cry very all of a sudden to say it's cholera, it is dysentery and all that. And then later on, there's public announcements that no, that was not the case. Then you wonder, probably here, there were gaps. Because it should be, and every school has a matron. So there is somebody who is fully in charge of the day-to-day welfare of the children in the school. So have we even made these matrons to be, or matrons and patrons to be motivated in doing their jobs? And you'll see them, they are the least paid workers in the school.
So there's the issue of motivation.
There's also the issue of the motivation, because this is somebody you are giving a mandate to be in charge of, let's say, 1,000 children in a school. And you can see how the job can be very overwhelming, just to ensure that there is food, that the food is very okay, the children's health is very okay, and report the same and all that kind of stuff. But you can imagine how this person is struggling. And this is an individual. In most schools, we have only just one matron. So you can imagine even the ratio of that to the children. And of course, our constitution, which is our supreme law in Article 43, which provides on the social and economic rights. And the education is an inalienable right globally. You cannot deny a child education. So it's an investment we are making for the future generation. So even as we make that investment, we ask ourselves that, are we making the right investment by also ensuring that these children are safe and are also growing in a healthy manner? We want our children to remember their places of learning with a lot of pride, that when we were in this school, this is how we used to take care of ourselves. And of course, you know, I've just mentioned around food. There's also the issue of the water.
Indeed.
Because the water is also another critical, because these are just basic needs. These are just basic needs in a school. You find a school does not, children still go to the river to fetch water.
Correct. And they drink straight from
there. And they drink straight from there. These are children growing, these are teenagers. The aspect of also having water, you know, clean water for use in cooking is also very important, because you ask yourselves, when we have different sources of water, like let's say from the streams, from the rivers, from the boreholes, how are those boreholes inspected? Just the way a fire extinguisher in a supermarket it gets inspected annually by the authorities. Even our authorities in the education sector should have a mechanism on how they look at that. But again, I think it's also even so expensive because the lack of practice and ownership of these things makes our education system, our education sector management to be very expensive because it requires that you need to police people.
Right.
But I think from CRECO's perspective, I think if we inculcated values and ethos among pupils, among students, among parents, among teachers, so that they own and practice what is right when they know that it directly affects their life. And there's a parting shot.
Right.
Is the food eaten in the staff room the same as the food that is eaten by the pupils and the students?
I think it cuts across, right? I believe it's the same food that...
No, let's ask ourselves.
Yeah,
yes. Even in some schools,
it's an interesting question,
the chef that is making a food for teachers is a different one that is making for us. Well, I mean, it should be common food because these are all human beings in the same environment. I mean, let's challenge ourselves and even break some norms and say there are no superior people in this space called a school, and there are those who are less than the others.
Okay.
Even the person at the gate.
Yeah. So yeah, you brought in a very interesting perspective into the whole thing, and we did also mention, by the way, about the issue of effective surveillance and monitoring and ongoing as well. But I did change our conversation a little bit because I want Dr. Teresa to respond to one issue before we took a break, which is I mentioned a couple of. Let me just repeat some of those for your own benefit. Yesterday, we had a case of a student in Yabisia Secondary School in Kisii hospitalized for corporal punishment. This is still under the banner of safety in schools, right? You have for allegedly flaunting exam rules. You had 5 teachers pouncing on him and kicking him, tied to a log, and eventually caused severe harm to his private parts. Again, in fact, this is a story I did on a young boy who reportedly died at Chemase Secondary School in Nandi for allegedly being beaten by his teachers over cheating in the midterm exams. That report, though, is yet to come out. I think the post-mortem report is yet to come out from that. And then also, there was this other report of, again, another tragic case of a girl called Njoki of Njoro Girls Secondary School in Nakuru, who also died under mysterious circumstances, allegedly as a result of negligence by the school nurse who did not attend to her when she sought treatment at the school's nursing area for an ailment. So, when we were taking a break, Dr. Teresa, you mentioned something to do with the mental health aspect of also the teachers. So we have this issue of the ratio of students to teachers in schools is a big issue in this country. We have less teachers and many students in schools. And there's pressure, community pressure, family pressure, and all these things that contribute to a person's mental health. Do you believe that that's one of the reasons why we're seeing these recent cases of sort of hostilities in schools, some sort of chaos, if I may call it?
Okay, I may not have the whole answer, but I believe we need to take care of the teachers. So who is taking care of the teachers? I think it's all about, like what Mr. Cheponi said, it's all about getting the grades, how many A's have you gotten, and so much pressure from the board. But who's taking care of the teachers? TSC have done their part. They've posted the teachers, they monitor the curriculum, they're able to pay the teachers, but who's taking care of the teachers? And this is where we look at the mental health of the teachers, because these teachers are parents. You wouldn't beat up your child to death, and you wouldn't gang up and beat teachers. So there's a lot of stress that the teachers are going through, because like you say, you have the numbers that they're dealing with. But have we come up with a way in which you can debrief with the teachers? Because different schools have different environments. Like he says, teachers may get a different type of lunch compared to the students. But there are schools where there's actually no lunch served, and teachers have to carry their own food. And this to me, it's really about the happy gut, what I really what I was describing earlier, because if you don't really take care of the mental health of the teachers, then of course you're going to get a lot of stress. Students are also undergoing a lot of stress given the environment, so they are prone to, they're growing up, they're prone to doing things and not really being, always getting into trouble. But I feel we need to take care of the teachers. We have the Department of Mental Health in the Ministry of of Health, but that should not be, the buck should not just stop with them. We have stakeholders who can actually be able to work with them. As Mr. Chepkoni said, the board, and Catherine also mentioned, the board in the school really needs to come up with taking teachers even for a retreat. Teachers go on holiday, take them out for a retreat, let them debrief. And basically just try and see whether can we feed the teachers better, can we give them a better environment. Increasing the number of teachers may not be a solution because that's a bigger thing, but there must be ways in which you can take care of the teachers that they feel the school actually
because you believe they would contribute to a more conducive learning environment for all stakeholders within that ecosystem, right?
Yeah, because if you stress a teacher, I mean, a stressed teacher is an angry teacher.
But you also have stressed students, right?
Yes.
Like here in the Daily Nation on Monday, by the way, Monday, just the other day, 6 students were arrested in connection with a Sunday night dormitory fire at Kivayu Boys School. That's in Kakamega County. Now, parents want the students found to be behind us on attacks in schools expelled to protect other learners. So that, you see, that also contributes to the safety of learners in schools. So I think there's a lot of stress on both ends. So you have stress on the teachers, you have stress on the learners as well. So then we have to begin to see how to address some of these issues, right?
But parents also have a role to play. I think with the CBC, I think it's a gift to us because parents are more involved with the students. They follow up the students. But I think parents now need to come in and really see how best they can be able to work with the school and really follow up what is happening in the school. The other thing also, from the students, we need to start like school health clubs. And school health clubs really has a whole idea of inculcating the culture of also being able, from the student, to be able to work towards school health. And this really has long-term implications because, you know, like in health, we've talked about the happy gut. If you don't have a balance in the bacteria in the gut, you not only will be more at risk of the cholera and E. coli and all the other bacteria, but you're looking at the long-term effects of non-communicable diseases, which include diabetes, hypertension, and even cancer later in life. So I think for me, it's all about being able to see what do the students need at this time. Yes, they are banning. Where are they banning? Where are they banning the dormitories? And this really has to do with the mental health. So I feel mental health should actually be prioritized on the side of the teacher and also on the side of the students. And like what Mr. Chepkoni said, the Board of Governors have other things to discuss. They really don't want to, but I really feel this needs to come on top of the list before you talk about
health approach, mental, physical health, as well as we're looking at that, right?
Yes.
All right. Catherine, as we wind up, I just want to get, your parting shot as we're moving forward. I want you to list some of the key issues that you perhaps, as you sit there, hope that the stakeholders, the government, the schools themselves, the parents, the students must put in place to ensure that we have that conducive environment to grow, to learn, so that our learners can be able to get the most impact from their education.
Okay, before I give my parting shot, I just want to contribute to the aspect of mental health because I think it's very important, especially for the learners as well as the teachers. There's something that you mentioned about the element of parental engagement in the well-being of the learners. There's a lot of research that we've done as APHRC that has shown, positive academic performance and even positivity when you look at how parents are able to support their learners, being part and parcel of opening up communication lines so that your child can be able to talk to you about some of the issues that they are facing. So I think that's something that is very important. At the school level, we have guidance and counseling where the learners are able to benefit from that kind of support. But we should ask ourselves, does this also extend to the teachers? How can we be able to make sure that we support our teachers for them to be able to deal with some of these issues? Now, in terms of some of the, what I would really like to see, first and foremost, is the need for us to really foster collaboration, especially when we are talking about issues of school health and safety. Working in silos will not cut it because, the school is an ecosystem. Very many things move into play for us to be able to safeguard the learners. The Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education, they need to talk to each other. Okay, we need to also look at these various policies, beautiful policies that we have. Are they being implemented? What are the gaps and why have they not perhaps been implemented? What can we do to be able to make sure that the good policies we have are being implemented? What is the role of development partners, stakeholders, and the community as a whole? How can we be able to push for the school to have that culture, you know, collaborative responsibility, because everyone needs to feel like they have a responsibility in as far as safeguarding of our children is concerned. So I think when we approach these issues from a multi-sectoral approach, then we will really see benefits, because we will start to maximize the kind of strategies that we have, and also maximize the benefits of the programs that we put in place as stakeholders.
Right. Bwana Joshua, your parting shot as we're moving forward, some of the key issues you take away when we're looking at that environment to create a safe haven for our learners and teachers and teaching staff and non-teaching staff as well.
Yeah, Zainab, this conversation should not end. You've begun a very important topic in our country, which should be taken right to the village. And for me, and us at CRECO, we feel that this conversation should be domesticated at the school level. We have the national policies, we have the county level policies, but we should have also domesticated policies at the school level. Because the way, let's say, if infrastructure is placed in a school, is not uniform across the country. You know, structures in the coast region is not the same as in the Rift Valley region, which is very cold area. So they need to have their own domesticated discussion on how they can put safety measures and health measures among the people who are in schools. And this begins from the administration of the school to put administrative measures, following the guidelines that have been given by the government, so that we see also practices among schools. They can even benchmark or even peer learn from each other. Because, you know, there was a year when the government did not want any grills put on the windows of dormitories or even classrooms. But we ask ourselves, did the culture change? Did the problems get, did all those problems got solved? Or it did not? We still discuss the same now. Then there is the elimination. There are practices that probably have been proven to be very dangerous, like, for instance, use of chemicals in preservation of food. Is it not high time we went, let's say, for instance, a food preservation that is more natural in our schools, in a way that, let's say, for instance, we have anti-weevil bags. We have now anti-weevil technology that has come. You don't need to put chemicals, but you just put a bag of maize there, tie it, there's no weevil, and there's nothing that is going to... So, I mean, substitution method. Then there's also the engineering aspect, the designs that we are putting in place. Nowadays, there are slippery tiles that may not be very safe for our children or any user, including persons with disability. Or let's say, for instance, the use of stairs in schools without consideration of persons who, people who are living with disability. I mean, so those are engineers. I mean, so it's everybody's contribution. Then there is the administrative aspect, whereby even as a parent, when you are taking your child to school, how have you prepared this child just in case if there is danger, just the way when you are at home, you know that if there is fire, this is what you do, even first aid and all those things. So it's a continuous awareness and awareness creation among all that are involved in our schools. And for me, there is a strong connection between the school and the home, I mean the household level. Whatever that is happening in the household level will be transferred in school. I think my colleagues here have given a very good example that teachers are also parents. Even these unfortunate situations that you've highlighted that are happening in our country could also be prevented, because there could be issues that probably we do not understand better. Then in conclusion, let me observe that there is a generational gap in parenting. The way our parents brought us up, those of us who are here now in studio, may not be the same way we, all of us here, are bringing up our children. And also the same applies to the teachers, because the older generation teachers, in their application, of course, they went through the same training and all that. But now we are in a digital era.
Things have changed.
Things have changed. So can we also be adaptive in a way that we also, and I'm happy that this CBC, competence-based curriculum, is trying to adopt the whereby we inculcate digital skills. Even as we talk about safety and health, how have we applied technology to give us real-time information. Or let's say, for instance, do schools have, let's say, the aflatoxin measuring machines?
Right.
We should provide those things because they are there now available. If you go to the National Cereals and Produce Board, they have those. They cannot receive maize from farmers when they have not passed the test of that particular machine. Why can't our schools, which are close to around, let's say, 900 bags of maize, also have the same machine?
But that would be a bit difficult, because I want to believe that when we have already infrastructural issues within our schools, we'll be getting the machine. How expensive is it? We already are facing financial resources crisis in some of our schools. That would be quite.
But Zainab, let me challenge Kenyans. Is there a day where we've stopped paying taxes? You know, also disinformation also can play a role here.
Yeah.
Because we have never had a tax holiday. Is there a year where parents have been exempted from paying school fees?
No.
Even the politicized free education, let's say in primary schools and secondary schools, parents still pay money.
Yeah.
And even if we say free education, government also remit money to these schools. So it's a budgeting issue. It's the issue of capacity and planning, and say which are our priorities.
All right.
Is passing the exams a priority, or safety and health measures first?
Well, they can
which one comes first? So we need to ask ourselves those discussions.
Could be quite a priority. All right, let me get from Dr. Teresa your final remarks as we wind up.
I think what Chepkoni has said, and Catherine, we have really many issues to deal with. But for me, I just come back to the happy gut.
Yeah.
Because it's all about being able to provide good food that will actually be able to ensure that the immune system in the child is actually well. The well-being of the child. And this, like we said, we can actually do through the CBC. For example, the step study that was done in 2015 actually showed that as Kenyans, we don't take enough portions of fruits and vegetables.
Right.
And I think we all know that young students are young, they're adolescents, so they need a lot of energy. So most of the diet is really a lot of carbohydrate. I don't think we take adequate amounts of fruits and vegetables. Yet those are the ones that will promote the gut bacteria and give you a very sharp brain, which the teachers now will be trying to teach and basically you end up getting good marks.
Yeah.
So I really feel at the end of the day it comes back to the plate, and like what Mr. Chepkoni said, you start from the farm to the plate, but at the same time as you're monitoring what's happening from the farm to the plate, make sure that you still have enough fruits, vegetables which can be grown in the school, because fruits and vegetables you can't put in the store for 3 months. You really have to be able to provide for that, and most schools have enough land to be able to do that. And then of course they won't have to purchase that. So for me, I feel it's more of a fruits and vegetables. After all is said and done, take care of the teacher, take care of the student. If they have a good well-being, then I think we'll probably do better.
All right.
And it's a multi-sectoral approach.
Indeed.
Yeah.
All right. And just to mention here, 2 comments. One from Jorma JM saying, back in the days, the health officers used to visit schools more often, but nowadays they care about hotels. Our humanity and care has lost its own ways and value to the future. Moses Kip Kemboy saying, trained cooks will need a good salary, and our schools hate standardized quality services because they cannot offer or cannot afford. These are just your comments here. We'll be reading more and engaging with you online, so talk to us. The hashtag is MLiveNTV. Thank you, Dr. Teresa Kinyari Mwendo, Chair, Public Health Society of Kenya, Catherine Asego, Research Officer at the African Population and Health Research Center, as well as Joshua Changwoni, who's the Executive Director, Constitution and Reform Education Consortium Kenya. That's CRECO Kenya. Thank you so much for coming in this morning. I think it's a conversation we really have to advance and forward in trying to see what we can do to be able to create that environment that we so much need for everyone, for parents, for teachers, and for students, most importantly. All right, so this is where we wind up. My name is Zainab Ismail. Your World is coming up shortly with Winnie Lubembe. You do not want to miss that. Have yourself a good morning and good day.
do you keep your toilets clean?
I use normal detergent and bleach for washing.
The detergent and bleach cleanless can leave behind yet